The Reinvention of Edison Thomas, Chapter 9, Part 1. Kiss me, you fool. Eddie's traffic nightmares returned, and once again they included Jim, or rather, Jims. Multiple copies of Jim paced mechanically back and forth across the street, only to be picked off one by one like ducks in an old-time arcade shooting gallery. He decided that the best way to stop the nightmares was to fix the problem with his invention. He went back to the drawing board, or, more precisely, the junk pile. Kip's observation haunted him. His whole strategy for detecting whether cars stop at the stop sign wouldn't do any good for the pedestrians. He needed something that would predict if the cars were going to stop and alert the pedestrians ahead of time to avoid being hit. That seemed impossible. How was he going to predict the future? Was there a crystal ball in his pile of junk? He rummaged around a bit. A handheld video game, a weed whacker, a vacuum cleaner. He thought some more. Drivers who had no intention of stopping would probably be going faster than those who intended to stop. In fact, Eddie had noticed that correlation while he was testing the old failed version of the monitor. But how could he measure velocity? He wished he had a radar gun in his junk pile, like the police used to catch speeders. Radar guns bounce radio waves off an object to determine how fast it is moving. Eddie probably couldn't get his hands on a radar gun, so he would need to build one himself. Unless he did some careful shielding, the microwave range radio waves could be dangerous. Then there was LiDAR, which works on the same principle but uses pulses of light from a laser. Sometimes the police use LiDAR and they can take a picture of the offending vehicle. That would be good, thought Eddie. Catch them in the act. But LiDAR could also be dangerous. Eddie imagined a 6-year-old looking directly into the laser. It would not be pretty. He could also use ultrasound waves. Some cameras use pulses of ultrasonic waves to measure distance. Like bats and dolphins use echolocation or sonar. That would be really complicated too. Panic was starting to leak into Eddie's head. He'd never get this figured out, and somebody could get hurt. Dad came into the basement. Having trouble? He asked. How can you tell? Well, you sort of start to vibrate when your thoughts are getting out of control. What's the problem? I need to determine the speed of cars at the stop sign, but I'm having trouble coming up with a design for a radar gun. A radar gun? That would be complicated. Let me tell you about something my Uncle Sawyer taught me when I was young. It's called the KISS principle. Gross, Dad. It has nothing to do with smooching, Dad assured him. KISS stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. You're overthinking the problem. What do you mean? What is speed? Velocity. It's the distance traveled per unit of time. You don't really need to measure velocity. All you need to do is measure distance and time. A small point of clarity began to grow in Eddie's cluttered head. Distance, time. I do not need to measure the speed of the cars the whole time, just the time it takes to travel between 2 points. That would give me the velocity. Exactly. The clear spot in Eddie's head expanded. He just had to break the problem down into simpler parts. Sometimes Dad had good ideas, although Eddie would never admit it. Now, how would he detect the car? Eddie, said his dad. Yes? It's time for bed. You have school tomorrow. I know. Dad had begun opening and closing the drawers of his workbench. Now, where did I put my needle-nose pliers? Again, Dad was asking him to read his mind. Fact number 20 from the Random Access Memory of Edison Thomas. African elephants can communicate over long distances by making sounds that have a frequency below the range of human hearing. On the way to school the next day, Eddie stopped at the intersection of Hatteras and Delaware to ponder his latest puzzle. He still didn't know how to detect the position of a car to determine its velocity. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and tried to imagine he was on the beach. It was no use. How could he pretend he was at Rock Island when he kept hearing cars? There are no cars on Rock Island. He stood on the sidewalk and watched the cars pass in front of him. 21 cars went by, but only 16 came to a complete stop. He looked at the cars and thought about radio waves, sound waves, and laser beams bouncing off the sides of the car. A metal detector might work, but Eddie wasn't sure the distance between the curb and the car would be small enough for a detector to be effective. Eddie jumped at the loud, crunching sound as the tire of a car flattened an aluminum can. A light bulb turned on in his head. Ever since he had seen a cartoon character get an idea by having a picture of a light bulb appear over his head, Eddie often saw that very same light bulb turn on in his head when he got a sudden great idea. Eddie had been thinking of electronic detection devices that would sense the presence of a car through the air. A similar idea would be to use the weight of the car to design something that would sense when the car ran over it. Excited by his revelation, Eddie hurried along to school. When he got there, he removed the sticky note that said "Dork" from his locker door and discovered that the door was jammed. Once he managed to open the door, he saw the reason for the jam. It was jam and ketchup and mustard and mayonnaise. The locker had been completely filled with condiment packets, which spilled onto the floor at his feet. He looked around to see if anyone had witnessed this condiment event, but luckily the hall was empty this early in the day. Eddie didn't want to spend another afternoon in detention, so he hurriedly picked up the packets and began shoving them into his backpack. His heart rate increased as his fight or flight response kicked in. He tried to fit all the packets into his backpack before students started to show up. Several of the packets had leaked, covering his history book with a pink mixture of ketchup and fat-free ranch dressing. He wiped the book clean with his sleeve. Zinc, gallium, germanium, arsenic, selenium. Eddie let out an audible squeak as someone tapped him on the shoulder. What did you do?" asked Justin. Eddie exhaled forcefully. "I did not do anything. Somebody filled my locker with these things. They must have slid them through the ventilation slots. That is probably why some of them are broken. They must have been torn as they went through." "I'll give you 3 guesses who did it, and the first 2 don't count." "What? Who do you think did it?" "I do not know. Mira, maybe. She might be getting me back for wrecking her sweater." "She told you she wasn't mad, didn't she?" said Justin. "Come on, it's obvious." "Who?" "Mitch, that's who." Justin's voice was getting louder. "Why would he do something like this? Maybe he wanted me to have ketchup to test his ketchup gun. But you said he did not really want me to make him a ketchup gun." "He's trying to get you in trouble again. Mitch isn't your friend, Eddie. He makes fun of you and trips you and pushes you around." Eddie didn't say anything as he shoved the rest of the packets into his locker. Eddie wished Justin was wrong, but what if he were right? What if all those friendly slaps on the back weren't so friendly? Mitch and Eddie used to build forts together and pretend they were working together to defend themselves against the evil attackers. Mitch Man and Super Eddie saved the world from giant robotic lobsters and mutant garbage cans. Could Mitch Man have gone to the other side? "See you later," said Justin. Eddie looked at his stained sleeve. He hoped he would be able to tolerate the smell of ketchup and ranch dressing all day. Fact number 44 from the Random Access Memory of Edison Thomas. Lobsters can be green, blue, yellow, red, or white. All lobsters turn red when cooked. Lobster blood is clear and colorless. When exposed to oxygen, it turns blue. "We're going to work on some stories today," said Tiffany, pulling 6 big cards from an envelope and spreading them out on the table. Each card had a different picture on it. "I'd like you to arrange these cards so that they tell a story," she explained. "Then we'll talk about the story." Eddie jumped when Tiffany's beeper beeped. Tiffany looked at the beeper and said, "I'll just be a minute." Eddie watched her walk out of the room, her ankles teetering precariously on top of her shoes. How did people stay upright on heels that high? It seemed to defy the laws of physics.